My name is Eva Kutosh. I'm a disability attorney in Portland, Oregon. I think I was selected perhaps because I'm a neutral party, not neutral to the issues, but neutral because I'm not voting in Lincoln County. I wanted to start by having Nora introduce the sessions today. Nora, if you could unmute, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so thank you, Lincoln County, for allowing us this important opportunity for the candidates to speak not only to the issues most on your minds, but also the issues near and dear to my heart and the hearts of many Oregonians who have disabilities, those who have loved ones with disabilities, and colleagues with disabilities, and those whose work is to ensure that everyone has equal access to services and opportunities in Oregon. In Oregon, 24% of adults and 30% of youth report living with a disability. 19% of Oregon children from birth to age 17 have a special health care need or a chronic physical, developmental, psychological, behavioral, or emotional condition that requires special health and related services of a type or amount beyond that required by children generally. Among Oregon adults age 80 or older, 47.1% have a disability. The need is there, obviously. And as always, the question is, what will is there to commit to addressing those needs? In today's forum, we're seeking information from the candidates on how and how vigorously they plan to work to ensure equal access to all services, buildings, communication, information, and other matters. The Disability Without Abuse Project, who is hosting this forum, has a particular interest in the issues of abuse and neglect experienced by a large percentage of those with disabilities, and a desire to know how each of you, in your particular role, plan to initiate efforts to reduce the risk of abuse and to increase or ensure access to all public response services for those with disabilities. Let me be clear. When I use the term disability, because that's what communicates, I think a better term is not disabled, but differently abled. We are all bringing our own abilities to the work, to our communities, and to taking care of each other. I want to thank you so much for agreeing to share your plans and strategies to improve the lives of Oregon residents. I am now turning this over back to Eva Kutosh, who has herself worked tirelessly on these issues during her distinguished career. Again, thank you so much.
Welcome to the candidate. The first interaction we're going to have today is actually going to be a debate between Representative David Gomberg and Max Sherman. Thank you for your willingness to participate and answer questions from Lincoln County voters. And really a special thank you to all of those who submitted questions. We had over 300 questions submitted, and our apologies in advance because we're not going to be able to ask them all. If we could start and alternate between the two of you. The first question is to have you describe your present position, the responsibilities of the position you're running for, and what made you decide to run. And start, please, with Representative Gomberg.
Well, thank you so much, Eva. How much time do we have, by the way, for that broad question?
Well, we have 25 minutes altogether today, so I would limit my answer to about a minute.
All right, well,
minute and a half.
In a minute, let me tell you, I am State Representative David Gomberg from House District 10. You know, we live in a remarkable state, and we live in a particularly special part of this remarkable state here on the Central Oregon coast. It's not red Oregon, it's not blue Oregon, it's purple Oregon. And oh, by the way, a third of the people that live here are over the age of 65. And I will tell you that since I first arrived in the legislature, I have been working very closely and carefully on issues affecting older Oregonians and Oregonians with different abilities. I serve on the Governor's Commission for Senior Services and took a lead in making sure that we fully funded Project Independence, which helps people stay independent and secure in their own homes. I was also very involved in budgeting issues that affected the Department of Human Services. And a result of that, the Oregon Council on Retired Citizens named me, as they said, one of the strongest advocates for older Oregonians in the entire legislature. Now, I could go on and on about a lot of the different issues that we're facing right now, but I think I'm going to pause at this point, give Mr. Sherman a chance to share his background with you as well, and then get into the specific questions.
Thank you. Mr. Sherman?
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this forum. So I am Max Sherman. I'm a candidate running for representative for House District 10, and spent 35 years as a high school agriculture sciences teacher. And I also have a daughter who is a disabled vet, so I do have some understanding of issues that our disabled population faces. I threw my name in the hat to run because I've been frustrated, I think, with the direction our state has been going. And I think we need to look at refocusing some of our spending and look at some of our priorities. And one of my priorities on my campaign website that you can look up, or that I've talked about before, is looking at our populations that are struggling, whether that be hunger, whether that be disabilities, whether that be individuals who just low income. And unfortunately, we have plenty of those issues here on the coast. So that's one of the focuses of my campaign, is looking at those disadvantaged populations.
Thank you. Representative Sherman, what is one part of the state government that would receive more attention if you were elected this time?
Okay. Well, I have the number one focus on my campaign as a retired teacher has been education. And I think education is really important, and it's going to affect all aspects of life. We end up with better educated young people. They're going to have opportunities to land better jobs. They're going to be, paying more taxes. They're going to just, be overall better citizens, and it's going to improve the economic health of our state. And a healthy economic base for our state is going to allow us to provide services for those that need it. So I think that education is going to be a key point in building that base to help all Oregonians.
And Representative Gomberg, what would receive more attention from you if you were to go back to the House?
Well, thank you. My priorities will continue to be education, healthcare, creating better jobs, particularly in our part of Oregon, and the safety and security of our neighborhoods and the people that live there. But let's be honest. Your question was, what areas of our budget are going to get more attention? And in this unusual year, we're bringing in less revenue because fewer people are working. They're paying less income tax. Companies are not selling as much, so they are not paying as much corporate tax. And we're not even selling as many lottery tickets because so many of the places that we sell them have been closed. This coming year is not going to be about which areas we put more attention into. It's going to be which areas we preserve the current spending levels at. And I am going to be working very hard to make sure that we preserve and improve our education system, our healthcare system, and the very important programs that take care of our seniors and people with different abilities.
Thank you. I'm sure you are both aware, and you've referenced this in your work in the past, that abuse and exploitation are serious dangers for our seniors and for those with disabilities. They experience abuse at much higher rates than the general population. What plans do you have to change this? Representative Gomberg?
Well, I think your question goes to some of the broader challenges that we are facing. And here on the coast, so many people are struggling to simply pay their bills. And the end result of that income inequality means that we have higher levels of crime. We have higher levels of abuse. We have higher levels of substance misuse and addictions. And if we are going to address the underlying causes of abuse, then we need to improve our economy for everybody that's here. Now, that being said, we certainly need programs in place that are going to address abuse and crime, harassment, and incivility when it occurs. But long term, we need to look at the causes, the underlying causes of those systemic problems. Better jobs, higher incomes, more safety and security for the people that live here are going to reduce the problem in the long run.
And Mr. Gomberg, the same question to you. What plans would you have to change the current high incidence? I'm sorry.
I think you were referring to Mr. Sherman.
I am.
Yeah.
One
Okay,
answer.
Yeah, thank you. I think we have an immediate crisis that's facing us that COVID has presented with us. That's going to be an immediate need that we need to address to try to get our economy back up and going, get people back to work, get people feeling safe in getting out and doing things, because we've seen incidences of higher abuse, higher abuses of opioids and other drugs, because people are just simply locked up. They're frustrated. They don't know where to go. They don't know where to turn. They're afraid to make that call to get help. So we have an immediate need to get our economy working and to work our way through the issues facing with COVID. Long term, we just need to make certain that we can protect the services that help those individuals as much as possible. We need to make certain that our uniformed officers are fully funded so they can respond and help when needed, and just provide any support we can.
Thank you. Next question is something of a follow-up to what we were just talking about, but on the economic growth side. With the reduction and collapse of many of the larger businesses and employers, more people have started new, smaller niche businesses to fill needs logistically and financially. What are your plans for creating and maintaining a business-friendly economic development program for small businesses, moving to and developing within our state and the county as they deal with the various rules, regulations, and requirements? Representative Gomberg.
Well, first of all, let me say I'm proud to be the guy that actually doubled funding for our small business development centers. And those are critical offices that exist within every community college in the state, which means the support and the resources were going to every part of the state. But there's a larger challenge that we're facing right now. Median family income in Oregon has gone up 21% in the last 10 years. In Portland, it's gone up 35%. But at the same time, here at the coast, median family income has gone down 6%. Up 35 in Portland, down 6% at the coast. And the Oregon economy, at least until 2020, was doing pretty good, but it was doing well in other places. We need to make sure that we are focused on bringing the benefits of Oregon's recovery to all parts of the state, particularly to our part of the state. And you know that I'm a small business guy myself. My wife and I ran a small business for 30 years here on the coast. I often say that I don't think there's half a dozen people in the Capitol that actually own a cash register. That experience, that day-to-day background makes a difference in Salem when you're talking about taxes, when you're talking about regulations, when you're talking about minimum wage, when you're talking about so many issues that affect our small businesses and their ability to thrive and succeed and to put more people to work. I support small businesses. I'm actually introducing once again a proposal to reduce taxes on our smallest and startup enterprises, and I'm going to continue to be a champion for our smallest businesses, particularly those here at the beach.
Mr. Sherman, what are your plans for creating and maintaining a business-friendly economic program for small businesses that develop within our state and your county?
Okay, so first, just a little bit about my background. As a high school teacher in Tillamook, I also worked with Tillamook Bay Community College and in helping the development of their industrial maintenance program, which was helping to provide good family wage jobs opportunities for our students who are coming out of high school. So looking at ways to boost our small businesses and keep them very viable. We need the education behind that so people have the education to work in those. And we do have the big concern with what's going on between the divide between Portland and our rural areas. The income inequality that is there. And I think that also needs to be addressed by taking a look at our state budget. Our state budget has grown, I believe, by nearly 70% in the last 10 years. Incomes haven't done that, especially here on the coast. So we need to take a look at the taxing of our businesses, the regulations that they have to face, and see if there's a way we can ease those burdens so they can, maintain their income and to develop and grow.
Thank you. Representative Gomberg, what has your outreach been to individuals with disabilities so far, and how many of your current staff have disabilities?
Well, my current staff is one person. And during the legislative session, I get a second person. I am not allowed to ask them whether they have any disabilities. So I don't know the answer to that question. I will tell you, I grew up in a household with a sibling that had different abilities, and I'm particularly sensitive to the kind of concerns that you are raising. When I'm not in Salem, I'm out in our communities every single day. There's this mythology that the Oregon legislature is a part-time enterprise, but in fact, it's a full-time, more than full-time obligation. And in our district, I am out every day, whether it's traveling to Tillamook or to Walport or to Sheridan or to Falls City. And I'm visiting with schools, I am visiting with small businesses, and I am visiting with families, and I'm visiting with people that have unique and special challenges. As I said when I started out, this conversation today, that a third of the people that live in our district are over the age of 65. That creates special needs and special challenges. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that everybody in those age categories are in need. For the most part, we've got people who are very active, very vibrant. They've got a lifetime of experience. They've got free time, and in some cases, extra money that they put back into our communities to make us more vibrant, more interesting, more sustainable. And they're taking that lifetime of experience and they're helping each other. I think that's the way it should work. And I'm very pleased to be out there, particularly on a weekly basis, attending fundraisers that are designed to help people in need.
Mr. Gomberg, would you like me to repeat? I'm sorry, Mr. Sherman, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes.
My
yes,
apologies. The question is whether you have done any outreach to people with disabilities and are working with any on your campaign at the present time.
Okay, so my campaign is primarily myself, my wife, and my campaign manager. So we're kind of a low budget, low numbers group. My wife and I do have a small business. When we retired from teaching 5 years ago, we started a small produce business. But again, that's just my wife and I. I did teach high school for 35 years. And as a high school teacher, worked with a lot of students that had disabilities, whether they were physical or whether they were, challenged academically, working with special education teachers, trying to design special programs to meet the needs of those individuals was always something that was extremely important to me. We had a young man a number of years ago that entered my welding class that was in a welding chair. In a wheelchair, and getting up to a welding bench just wasn't practical. So I took a group of my advanced welders and we turned around and we built a special table just for that particular individual. So I've had opportunities to work with disabled individuals. As I mentioned before, I have a daughter who is a disabled vet, and I am familiar with the struggles that she has gone through. Also, dealing with the individuals fundraising for those various types of groups is near and dear to my heart. And I've made a pledge that I'm going to pledge my legislative salary after taxes to go to various groups of needs within the community, whether that be food banks, whether that be individuals that are working with disabled, but I'll be actively looking and sharing throughout the district my legislative salary to help those various groups.
Thank you. Here's a question that's been on the news for the last couple of years. Representative Gomberg, do you have a position on legislators not showing up?
Well, I certainly do. I think that that if you're going to accept the honor of this obligation, you should show up and do the job. And I don't care whether it's Democrats who did it years ago or Republicans who have done it with increasing frequency in the last couple of years. I think it's wrong to leave the building. I think that that our challenge is to work across the aisle to find honorable compromises that that address the concerns of as many people as possible in these critical conversations. But if you're not there, you can't have those conversations. I think walking out is wrong, and I think particularly accepting compensation for those days that you're not in the building, even if you're going to share it with somebody else in tax-deductible contributions, is also wrong. I think that we were sent to Salem to do the job, and you got to stay there and do it.
Mr. Sherman?
Okay. Well, yeah, this question, being as I'm on the other side of the aisle, and I have a slightly different view on it. I do believe that the provision for a walkout is a tool that is in the tool chest, but it is a tool that needs to be used as an absolute last resort. When it reaches the point where, for whatever reason, whichever side it happens to be, feels that they cannot reach that compromise. And again, I share the same opinion with Representative Gomberg. We do need to sit down and talk. We do need to work to reach compromise. But unfortunately, sometimes that isn't always possible and doesn't happen. And when the Republicans walked out this past session, they felt they were in a position where they were actually still doing the job and supporting their constituents who had some very, very serious concerns about a piece of legislation that just wasn't working for them, and they felt that they could not reach the compromise that was needed that would satisfy the needs of their constituents. So I do believe it is a tool, again, absolute last-ditch thing that, when everything else is exhausted, can be looked at.
Eva, I'm going to follow up, if I may, because I agree that that if there's going to be a walkout, it needs to be a last resort. And in the last 3 years, we have seen walkouts over climate change legislation. We've seen walkouts over funding for our K through 12 school system. We have seen walkouts over gun control issues. We've seen walkouts over vaccination issues. We've even seen walkouts over whether or not we should allow coyote hunting contests in Oregon. We are not walking out over last big issues as a last resort. We're walking out whenever we don't like where the direction of things are going, and it needs to stop.
Mr. Sherman, would you like to respond quickly?
Again, I feel that, I think part of the issue has been with the supermajority, and in my opinion, a supermajority, regardless of the party, simply does not allow good government to take place. A supermajority, even in the homeowners association, creates problems. And because of that, I felt we've been in a situation where compromise has not been possible. And there's been numerous issues that, as the Republicans felt important enough that they needed to walk out.
Okay, switching gears, Representative Gomberg, what is your response to the Black Lives Matter demonstrations that have been going on around Oregon?
Well, I support the right to freedom of speech, no matter what perspective that you are expressing. And I am so very pleased that when there have been gatherings here on the Oregon coast, that they have been respectful, they have been peaceful, and they have been effective. That's how it should be. Again, whether those demonstrations have taken a perspective in support of Black Lives Matter or on other important topics. And yes, I've gone out and participated in a number of those sidewalk rallies. Now, in other parts of the state, they haven't followed the wonderful example here on the state, on the coast. And that's really very disappointing. I support freedom of speech. I don't support violence. I don't support intimidation, and I don't support harassment. And You know, one of the things I really appreciated about the gatherings that were held here on the coast is that very often they were supportive of the police and supported by the police. And again, that's the way I think it should work. In Salem, I've been very involved in legislation that we have passed in the last few months, legislation proposed by the People of Color Caucus to try and find ways to better address weaknesses and mistakes that occasionally happen within the police community. When there are mistakes, they need to be addressed, and we have strengthened our approach here in Oregon to those problems. But it's not a reflection on all police officers. It's only a reflection on a minority of officers who cross the line.
Mr. Sherman, your response, your reactions to the Black Lives Matter demonstrations and the issues they raise.
Okay, again, this is probably an issue where Representative Gomberg and I probably agree more than we do on anything else. Our First Amendment right to protest, to bring issues up are absolutely, incredibly important. But again, that does not include the right to riot and destroy property. I too have participated in several peaceful demonstrations here on the Oregon coast, and appreciate the fact that the organizers of those events worked very hard to ensure that it was going to be peaceful, that our message could be brought across, and it could be done so in a safe manner. Unfortunately, in other parts of the state, I feel that the Black Lives Matter issue in particular has been hijacked by groups with other interests, and I think that's extremely unfortunate. And that I'm 100% opposed to the destruction and the riots that have gone on. We do need to support our police. We also do need to call out individuals that step over the line, regardless of what position or what occupation they are in.
Thank you. Representative Gomberg, what's the question that you would most like to ask your opponent?
Goodness. Well, the question I'd most like to ask him is what he plans to do with his free time next year while I'm working in the legislature. But I'm sure he'd like to ask me that exact same question. Max, you've made a great deal about the fact that you plan to contribute your legislative salary to charitable causes. And I think that's a wonderful and generous offer. But I also know that you are a comfortable retiree with a tier 1 subsidy coming back from your many years of education. And I would ask that, what about the people who are teachers now? What about the people who are police officers now or firemen now? Why do you oppose giving them the same level of retirement benefits that you receive now?
Yeah. So I have never stated that I'm opposed to those individuals receiving the same types of benefits that I have. Matter of fact, one of the things that has concerned me greatly over the last few years has been the benefit package that current teachers now have. The PERS system, I was just starting to teach when it went through its challenges back in 1980, and some of the deals that were made at that point in time. And unfortunately, hindsight has a clearer lens than what it did at that point in time. Were there some issues that maybe could have been done differently? Yes, very likely they could have been done differently. I do believe that we need to continue to look at the PERS situation. It's a challenging one. I am a tier 1 retiree. A majority of my retirement comes through that. And I'm very appreciative of that retirement that I do have. But we do need to take a look at how we can support our teachers, our police, our firemen, as they look forward to retirement someday in the future with a system that can support them.
Thank you.
Mr. Sherman, the same question for you. What question would you most like to ask Representative Gomberg?
It's difficult, yeah. The one question that Representative Gomberg and I have talked about on numerous occasions deals with the what I believe is overuse of the emergency clause. and time and time again, it's attached to bills, and we'd just like to know what can be done to limit or restrict the use of that particular bill, so it's not something that, it was part of what brought about the walkout with cap and trade, and just, would like to see what can be done to restrict the use of that bill.
Well, I appreciate that question very much. For people who are wondering what we're talking about, an emergency clause is a section attached to legislation that says it's going to go into effect right away rather than waiting the statutory amount of time. And that becomes of great concern to people with controversial legislation because it really, for the most part, eliminates your ability to go out and circulate petitions if you don't like a proposal the legislature has passed. And with those petitions, put the question on the ballot in Oregon as a referral. Now, I have said from the very beginning, I think emergency clauses are overused in the Capitol. And for 3 sessions in a row, I have introduced a proposal for a constitutional amendment that would require when you put an emergency clause on a bill, you say what the emergency is. Why does it need to go into effect right away? And put a stop to these phony and political emergency clauses that work to the detriment of Oregonians and their rights to review the efforts of the legislature. I have already requested a draft of that proposal to come back again. I can't get a hearing on it. That's incredibly frustrating to me. You mentioned the cap and trade legislation, and you know that I was prepared to support removing the emergency clause from that bill so that Oregonians who disagreed with it could collect signatures and take it out to the voters, because I've got great confidence in Oregonians. I've got great confidence in their ability to take a look at the situation and decide whether they agree with the legislature or whether they disagree. The referendum process is critically important. I want to see it protected. I was willing to take the emergency clause off the cap and trade bill. I will tell you that cost me politically. I've still got the scars to show for that, but it was the right place to be. And ultimately, cap and trade didn't get out of the Capitol because of the walkout, but I would rather that we had passed the bill and then allowed Oregonians, if they chose to circulate petitions and put it on the ballot.
We have one follow-up question. Thank you very much, Representative Gomberg. We have one follow-up question to the discussion we had about small businesses and supporting small businesses. And this is linked to the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. And the question for you is how committed you are to requiring businesses to comply with the ADA requirements. And can you be supportive of small business and support strong enforcement of the ADA?
Who would you like first?
Mr. Sherman.
Okay. I believe that I would fully support legislation, to support the Disabilities Act. I believe it's extremely important. I believe we also need to provide support for our small businesses, in order to help them provide the types of things they need in order to be in compliance with those. We also need to take a look at, keeping our seniors in their homes. We need to take a look at the ability of landlords to be able to retrofit houses to meet the needs of individuals with disabilities. So I fully support anything we can do to keep those individuals employed and provide the support for the businesses to meet the requirements of the disability laws.
Representative Gomberg.
Well, thank you. I'm going to say largely the same thing in a slightly different way. Running a small business is hard. Usually it's a mom and pop or a mom and mom or a pop and pop operation, but it's a small operation and you don't have lawyers and you don't have accountants in-house and you don't have a human resources department to help you wade through the plethora of regulations, rules, and requirements. Now, that being said, those rules and requirements are there for a good reason, and we need to provide small businesses with the tools to properly understand and properly apply those obligations. I don't want to see more people cited for not following the ADA rules. I want to see more people complying and understanding and embracing those ADA rules so that they can thrive as a small business, and the people that work for them or do business with them can also thrive as employees or as customers.
I thank you very much. We've gone a little bit over time. I very much appreciate Representative Gomberg and Mr. Sherman, your willingness to debate these questions, to answer questions from voters in your county. And thank you so much for giving us some of your Sunday.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Melissa, I don't know if you were here at the beginning. My name is Eva Kutosha. I've been the moderator for the afternoon. I'm a disability attorney from Portland, Oregon, and somewhat neutral in that I'm not voting in Lincoln County, but certainly care about all of the issues that we're talking about today. We did invite both of the candidates for a debate, but you were the person who chose to respond to the forum. So I just wanted the folks who are listening to know that everybody was invited that was running for the position that you were seeking. We had about over 300 questions submitted, which I think is pretty remarkable from folks in the Lincoln County area who are voting, and I'm not going to ask you all of those today, but let's start please with just asking to describe your present position, responsibilities of the position you're running for, and what made you decide to run.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. And I did have the pleasure of being here from the beginning. And so I got to hear Representative Gomberg and Mr. Sherman speak, which I always enjoy. Nothing like a debate. Anyway, I'm sorry that my opponent wasn't able to be here today, because I think it's helpful for voters to hear the two sides. But nonetheless, I am thrilled to be here. I am currently a Coos County Commissioner and have been for 8 years now. Prior to becoming a county commissioner, I was actually an in-house attorney for the Coquille Indian tribe, and as such represented the tribe in any sort of court cases they had, but including child welfare cases, and represented their assisted living facility. So had an opportunity to work on some of these issues that directly impact our most vulnerable citizens, and as such, I think it's really an eye-opening experience, and we all run for office because we want to make things better, and especially for the people that don't have a voice or people who feel like their voice isn't heard. So I never intended to run for state senate, but when Senator Roblin said he was going to retire, I wanted the opportunity to make sure that those citizens have their voice heard at the state and in all places where decisions are made that impact them. My father was a disabled veteran. He was 100% service connected at the time of his death, and he was in a wheelchair for the last 3 years of his life, and was a single person transfer and then a 2-person transfer later. So I had the experience of going into places with him where there wasn't a 1-person bathroom, and I had to figure out a way to help him get to the bathroom. And so I think having that experience, that sort of lived experience, is a different impact than just hearing about people struggling, with a non-ADA bathroom or someplace that doesn't have a ramp to get in. And so for that reason, I really want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to give everybody the same opportunities that we have. Thank you.
What would you say are the key differences between you and your opponent?
I like to think that both parties really want the same things. We all want a better life for our children. We all want a better economy. We just have different ways of going about it. And my campaign has been really supported by people, by working people in the unions. And people look at unions and they see that as one big group, but it's not. These are a lot of people that take the time and the effort to reach out and support candidates that they care about. They pool their money together so they can make a more collective impact. My first 3 races as county commission, I've run 3 times now. I have been heavily supported by grassroots donations. True, it's a much smaller race, and the fundraising for this one has been crazy compared to running for county commission. But I've always been very proud of the fact that my donations come from my friends and my neighbors and from people that have lived experience right in the district and appreciate the work that I do.
What part of the county state budget do you think, well, the state budget, I guess you've had experience with the county, but what part of that should be shielded from cuts? And if so, what areas do you think those are?
I heard Representative Gomberg say it, and it's very true. It's going to be a really tough budget year. Unfortunately, the impacts of COVID are going to be felt across the budget. From the county's perspective, I've been heartened to see that, frankly, a lot of the impacts are not as deep as we thought they would be. We found that there's some areas where actually the budget has recovered and has recovered at the county level in a very reasonable way. And it just reflects what people are doing with their time right now. People are cleaning out their garages. And so, we see certain segments of businesses that are doing better. The, do-it-yourself businesses, the clean out your garage, take all your stuff to solid waste, and camping. Frankly, parks revenues are up. A lot of people are going to parks, but we know that we're not going to be able to protect everything. And I think it's critical that we protect those services that impact our most vulnerable citizens. As a county commissioner, I have been heavily involved in the coordinated care organization, which actually administers the Medicaid dollars down here and everywhere in Oregon. All of Oregon has coordinated care organizations, but ours is specific to Coos and Curry counties. And so there are people that their lives are changed by having health care for the first time in their life. I still serve on the Community Advisory Council for the Coordinated Care Organization. And it's really eye-opening to hear people talk about having health care for the first time in their life and realizing the difference that makes for people and their level of financial security, knowing that they can actually go to the doctor and not have to worry that they're going to go bankrupt or that they won't be able to afford the care that they need. So programs like that, like the coordinated care organizations and the Medicaid expansion, are areas that we absolutely have to protect. And frankly, it's an area where we get more money back from the federal government for having those programs than we spend on the programs. And so it's even more critical that we preserve that funding.
Melissa, you mentioned earlier about the difference between fundraising for this position and for county government. Your opponent has used your public expense records to attack you. Would you care to comment on this tactic and some of the expenses that you've documented?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Coos County is not a rich county. Obviously, we have 3 county commissioners, and we serve in the role of county administrator as well as being county commissioners. Early on, when I first ran, I ran on the platform that decisions that are affecting Coos County are not being made in Coos County. We're being impacted by decisions made in Salem and Washington, D.C., and it is not enough to simply sit down here and wait for somebody to realize that they need to help us. We need to be in those places where decisions are being made and make our voice heard. And so when I became a county commissioner, my 2 fellow county commissioners said, you do the travel. We don't want to travel. They are 20 and 30 years older than me, and they have no interest in traveling, and they appointed me to do all the traveling. My travel is in our budget, and they sign off on every expense report I turn in. And so I admit, I feel like using my expense report is dirty politics. And it's a transparency issue. When the Republicans asked for that expense report, I told county council, comply to the fullest extent of the law, just like we're required to do. And we released all of that information. They have picked and chosen the things that they want to share in those expense reports and the things they want to highlight. I'm disappointed that that's the route that we've gone down, but I stand by my record and I stand by the work that I've gotten done. And frankly, some of those trips were reimbursed by national associations. I don't get to pick where I go. Frankly, somebody else sets up those meetings. And there was one trip that was to Hawaii and I didn't go. I said, there's no way I can justify to my constituents that this meeting is being held in Hawaii. But I figure that most people understand that July in Las Vegas is not a trip that I thought was going to be fun. So I have gone where I needed to go to make sure that the voice of Coos County is heard. And I am generally pretty frugal, and I eat a lot of hard-boiled eggs from gas stations when it's time to eat out.
I don't know that that's safe, but okay. On a very different subject, can you explain the controversy over the Jordan Cove LNG?
Oh, well, I mean, the controversy is that this project has been going on for 15 years through the permitting process. It started as an export terminal, and then it turned into an import terminal. And the county commissioners have had land use authority over it all that time. So I've had land use authority on it since I became a commissioner, which is quasi-judicial. So we aren't supposed to give our personal opinions about it publicly. I have one fellow commissioner who has, and so we've been to the Court of Appeals several times and up to the Oregon Supreme Court at least once on it, on whether or not he's so hopelessly biased that he can continue to opine on it. So we really try not to put our public opinions out now. But I think there's strong, valid opinions on both sides of this one. I think the most critical thing is that this should be an Oregon decision, and it should be made in Oregon. I'm opposed to the idea of projects like this being regulated and decided on the federal level. I think local citizens should get to make these decisions. And I would really like to see Coos County, Southern Oregon, maybe the entire Oregon coast, sit down and talk about what we want to be. What is our vision for the future of the coast of Oregon? This is a great opportunity to talk about strategic planning and what our vision is for what we're going to be, and what kind of businesses we want to see here, which will avoid future fights like the one that we've been having over Jordan Cove for the last 15 years.
Thank you. As a county commissioner, did you initiate or participate in actions or policies addressing the needs of the disability community? And if so, give us some examples.
Well, we do on a regular basis. I think the bigger part of being a county commissioner is the fact that at my county, like I said, we don't have a county administrator. So we have the direct impacts of being a 300+ person employer who has various employees that have, need for accommodation or need for assistance. And frankly, what we want to do is we always want to get the best employees. And we don't want people who have disabilities to feel like they're not welcome at our county. And of course, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, we would never do so. But we've made some changes to really help attract and retain employees that have disabilities or other abilities. And one of them is we built a new building for health and wellness. We had this struggle with the North Bend Annex where the elevator was frequently going out. And so it's an old building. A lot of people in Coos County were born in the building, including one of my fellow commissioners and Representative McEwen. Both of them always tell me that they were born in the North Bend Annex. But it was an old building with, all the problems that old buildings have: narrow doorways, narrow hallways, an elevator that's constantly going out, bad parking. So we couldn't, we only had, I think we had 6 disabled spots for people that needed them. And so it was constantly a challenge. And about 5 years ago, I sat down with our health and wellness director, and we had a long talk about the challenges of the building, the fact that the elevator was constantly going out, that we had mold issues and all these struggles. And we decided to build a new building. And we were able to do that at no additional cost to the taxpayers with funds that she had managed to save and hold back over the years to do that. And so we built a new building that's within walking distance of the Coordinated Care Organization, that's close to Southwestern Oregon Community College and Oregon Coast Community Action and the Domestic Violence Project. And so it's a much better spot for people. It makes it so much easier for people to do the business they need to do. And I really feel like that's one of the places where we really made an investment and made a change in Coos County to make it more accessible for everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do you support providing additional funding to train police about properly responding to crime victims, witnesses, suspects with mental illness, or those who have intellectual or developmental disabilities?
Absolutely. And my experience has been that most police officers want that help. They want that additional education. They want the ability to respond more effectively. I can tell you with our sheriff's deputies, the additional opportunities that we provided for training have been nothing but well received from them.
You've touched on this a little bit, but how would you say Lincoln County is unique and the major issues that you see there, as well as the opportunities?
Yeah. You know, there's a county commissioner saying that we all like, which is, you know, if you've seen one county in Oregon, you've seen one county in Oregon. People tend to lump all of the counties together, and you know, housing is no exception. Every county commissioner in the state of Oregon will talk to you about housing. Every county commissioner in the state of Oregon will tell you they have a slightly different issue with housing than everybody else. It's important that we provide tools in order to help counties deal with their issues and their challenges, but it's also really important that we allow that decision-making about how to spend those funds to be made at the local level. And I know you're talking to Claire Hall later today, and I'm sure that she will reiterate the same thing, but local decision-making is so critical for making sure that funds are spent correctly, because nobody other than your local officials really know where those holes are and where the gaps are in the services that they provide. We talk about county government a lot, and frankly, in a lot of ways, county government is a business. We have a budget, we have employees, we know where we need to make improvements, and where improvements, you know, can be made in a strategic way to make the best use of the dollars we have. Housing is definitely an issue in Lincoln County. Project Turnkey, which was recently approved by the E-Board, I believe, and I'm sure, as I said, Commissioner Hall will be speaking more about that, is a great opportunity to try to make some inroads in housing, especially immediately before the weather gets bad. That's one of the real challenges we're going to have, is we have a lot of people that have been displaced by these fires, and they don't have permanent housing right now. And many of these people make up the workforce that we really need on the coast and that our tourism economy relies on. And if we can't find housing for people, they'll move and they won't come back. You know, we know that from other areas that have faced natural disasters and lost housing. People move away and they don't come back because they make a new life somewhere else. So it's critical that we do what we can to put our finger on the scale with the housing right now, and to do it in such a way that what we're not doing is relaxing building codes or building substandard housing. We need to figure out a way to take advantage of the housing we have now. And at the risk of stealing Commissioner Hall's thunder about Project Turnkey, which I'm sure she'll speak about more, allows the use of state funding to buy underutilized hotels from willing sellers and use that as short-term housing for displaced persons until, you know, such time as we can deal with some of those issues, and then in the long run can be used to help resolve the homelessness issue. You know, we talk a lot about housing issues, and we have them up and down the coast. They're slightly different everywhere. But, you know, one of the things that we've done is create a housing needs analysis. I know Lincoln County has done the same. It's important that we continue to invest in those housing shortages that we see, that we make strategic use of government money in order to incentivize the housing projects that need to happen, and that we realize that, you know, frankly, a bottleneck in one section of the housing segment creates a bottleneck in the whole thing. So we need to be able to move housing forward for everybody.
Have you had experience working with the disability community as a county commissioner, and can you tell us about what some of those experiences were?
Sure. I'm the liaison to Coos Health and Wellness, which is our public health and mental health department. And so I've had an opportunity to meet with people that are in different segments of the disability community and address areas where we're falling short. And I tell people all the time, you have to tell me when we're falling short, because I don't just know, and I try to. But there are times when voters have to bring things to your attention, and it's important that we are made aware of those areas where we do have shortfalls. So I have really worked in order to make sure that we're serving everybody in our health and wellness department. I've also done what I can to make sure that the county generally is serving its citizens better across the board. There's always challenges. A really simple thing, we have a building that we hold our county commission meetings in, and it had a heavy door that swung out. And it was, like right at the edge of a ramp. It was a difficult door for people to get through. And because of the fact that it was an old building, we weren't able to put an easy opener on it. And so one of the things that happened a couple of years ago was we made the decision to invest the money in sliding doors. And it's so small and such a minor thing, but just increasing that level of accessibility. From the time that I had taken care of my father, I realized that makes a huge difference in the dignity of people. Just being able to get through that door and knowing that they weren't going to have a challenge and just be able to go through makes a huge difference in how comfortable people feel going to public meetings.
Thank you. And a question that we asked previously, but wondering what your response to the Black Lives Matter demonstrations are and what and the issues that they've raised.
And I'm an attorney by trade before I became a county commissioner. I'm always in support of people exercising their First Amendment rights peacefully. And we've had a few Black Lives Matter protests down here in Coos Bay and on the southern coast in Bandon. And I think we even had one in Coquille, where the county seat is. And I am pleased that those have all gone peacefully. And it's important that we remember that, we can peacefully disagree, and we should peacefully disagree. And we should take the opportunity to know each other and talk to each other and hear each other's concerns, because I'm not a person of color. And so I don't know what the experience is. I can speculate. I can have my opinion on what it's like to be a person of color in Oregon, but I don't know, and I will never have that lived experience. We have the BIPOC caucus in the legislature, and they do have the experience, and they have been sharing what the experience is. And it's important that we listen to those voices that are telling us what the challenges are and what needs to be done. I am, of course, not in support of any of the violence that's gone on in Portland. I think it's horrifying. I think it's a ridiculous exploitation of the movement, and I'm sorry for that. I think it keeps people from having their voices heard.
So in the last couple of minutes, is there a question you'd like to answer that I haven't asked you?
You've had some pretty good questions. I don't think so, not off the top of my head. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I really would encourage anybody who wants to reach out to me. My website is available. It's melissacribbins.com. My email is melissa@melissacribbins.com. And I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime who has questions or wants to know about something. Send me your phone number and I'll call. Or you can call me either way. I think my phone number is on the website. So thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate you guys setting this up.
Well, I'm not going to let you get off that easy. So how about this? What is it that you would like to accomplish if you had 3 priorities, if you're able to go to the legislature? What are the 3 things that you want to focus your time on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the big things for me is community college funding. I went to community college. My mom had a brain aneurysm when I was in high school, when I was 16. And so I wasn't able to leave for college right after high school. And so I stayed home to help take care of her. And I went to Southwestern Oregon Community College and got my associate's degree. If it hadn't been for community college, I would have never had the opportunity to go to college right off the bat. And my husband, when I met him, he hadn't gone to college yet. He was 31. He told me he was 29. We still joke about that. But when I met him, he hadn't gone to college yet, and he really wanted to. And he told me at that time that he thought he was too old. And I told him, you're going to be 70 either way. So he decided to go ahead and go to college. And he got his associate's degree from Umpqua Community College over in Roseburg. And so the two of us are just big believers in community college. And it's so important that we keep community colleges affordable and accessible for all of our students, because they allow people to go to college that never thought they'd be able to. And so that opportunity to me is tremendous. Of course, I talked about healthcare. I'm a big believer in healthcare access and affordability. And if there's any upside to COVID, I think it's showed us some other ways to operate that would have taken us longer to get to. We've done a lot of telehealth in Coos County since COVID has hit. And so, you know, being the person who drove somebody 4 hours to the doctor in Portland many times, I can tell you that I appreciate the opportunity that telehealth gives to see specialists, and maybe it can shorten the time period for some families that are waiting, you know, in between specialist visits. And so I think we really need to continue to focus on investing in broadband and allowing people more telehealth opportunities. I think it's the direction of the future. It doesn't take the place of getting to see a provider in person, of course, but there are some times where I really believe it can bridge the gap and help with that accessibility issue that we have here on the coast. Because we all know that we get a doctor, they stay for a couple of years, and then they tend to leave, or many of them tend to leave. And people are having to change primary care providers, and it's really frustrating. And if we can make some of those specialist visits easier by having that, then, you know, that's good for all of us. And of course, you know, I just kind of touched on broadband, but it's also a big deal for education. And we are really having a hard time right now. A lot of our students don't have access to broadband. And so they aren't able to school from home. We have one school district that's putting wireless on buses and driving out into neighborhoods and sitting in neighborhoods so the kids can have a wireless hotspot in the neighborhoods, but they can't get on the bus because of COVID. So they have to sit on the corners. And that's fine right now, but it's actually pretty cold out there, frankly, if you ask me. And when the rains start, it's really not going to be okay. And many of our parents aren't in a position where they can just go and sit in the car and let the kids sit in the car with them. So we really need to continue to make those investments in broadband for all of those reasons. And of course, there's the economic development aspect of it too. We know that many, many people would like to live on the coast if they had a way to make a living. And so those investments in broadband will also pay dividends in improving jobs and the economy on the coast, which is another area that we so critically need.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate your being with us this afternoon. Welcome. I think I saw your name at the very beginning, so I'm not going to give you the same spiel and introduction. But I do want to thank you very much for participating and sharing some of your Sunday with us. And if I could, would you please describe for us your present position, the responsibilities of the position you're running for, and what made you decide to run?
I'd be glad to, and I appreciate this opportunity. The position I'm running for is the position that I hold now, Lincoln County Commissioner. And, you know, Commissioner Cribbins alluded to this in her presentation. Unlike legislators or city council people who have the huge job in and of itself of setting budgets and policies for their organization, county commissioners, at least in mid-range counties like Coos and Lincoln, we've also got hands-on, day-to-day management responsibilities for the organization. We don't have a county administrator. Each commissioner directly supervises department heads. We're at the table guiding contract negotiations, and we're really working with the department heads on a day-to-day basis to make sure that we're constantly reviewing our business practices, to encourage, ensure maximum efficiency in the delivery of services, and also maximum accessibility. So I have been doing this job a while, 16 years. I am running for a 5th term, which is, if the voters choose to return me to the job, would be unusual, but not unheard of longevity in this position. And I'm running because people have encouraged me to continue my service. I think I'm continuing to be an effective commissioner. I enjoy the challenge, and I consider it a great, great honor to serve the people of Lincoln County.
Thank you. Well, what do you see as the key difference between you and your opponent?
Well, to me, it comes down to knowledge and experience. I do not question my opponent's sincerity when he says he wants to serve the community, but I do question his level of knowledge, his preparation for the position. He has never held elective office before. To my knowledge, he has never held any kind of appointive position like a planning commission or a budget committee. I haven't seen any sign of him really being networked in the larger community in terms of things like chambers of commerce or service clubs. And whereas I feel like I'm offering a solid record of accomplishment and results, I'm hearing, a few lofty ideas and cliches about it being time for a change, but no disrespect intended, but I'm not really hearing or seeing a lot of substance out of his campaign.
All right, well, since you've been on the commission for so long, this question might be a good one for you to answer for this Lincoln County voter. They said, in their opinion, Lincoln County public transportation doesn't fulfill our needs. What would you do to improve it?
Well, for most of my time in office, I have been the liaison commissioner for public transportation. And I don't know, I look upon our transit service with a glass half full kind of approach. I think we could improve access to services. We have worked steadily to do that. A few years ago, we were recognized for having the best small public transit system in the state. In my time in office, we have partnered with our two largest cities, Lincoln City and Newport, to set up inner city loop services. We've also partnered with the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz to establish a loop linking up Toledo, Siletz, and Lincoln City, which didn't exist before. When I came into office, it was not linked to the other public transit systems in adjoining counties. Now we are linked to all of those counties. So I believe, that we have made steady improvements in the service, but I will keep looking for ways that we can improve it, expand it, but on a sustainable basis. That's always been very important to me, because I think the very worst thing, and I've seen some other communities do this with the best of intentions, rolling out expanded services, and then when the revenue hasn't been there to sustain them over the long term, having to cut back. And really, we haven't been able to do that. But for instance, we have dial-a-ride service, again, available in Lincoln City and Newport, on-demand service to people's doorsteps. It's not available in the rest of the county. I would love to see us find a mechanism to do that. Another one of my priorities, in addition to more frequent service during the daytime hours, would be evening service. Something else that I've put into the mix in conversation with our transit director, and she's going to be looking at this in her long-range public budget planning, is whether we could go fareless. Some communities have done that. Only about 15% of our budget, I say only, but still every dollar is important. Only about 15% of our budget comes from the fare box. 90% of our riders, again, are riders of necessity, not riders of choice, which means that they are too young because of disability, because of economic situation. The bus is their only transportation alternative other than walking or depending on friends. So constant effort to increase public transit has been one of my focus areas, and it will continue to be if I'm reelected for another term.
Thank you. Claire, you mentioned the folks that are riding the bus. We had a question come in the chat box asking what arrangements the county is making to protect those who are unsheltered during the extreme weather that's predicted in the next few days. In the early days of the COVID pandemic, on my initiative, we stood up a short-term motel voucher program to help get people off the streets. It was COVID happened to hit immediately after our winter shelters had closed down for the season. After the county funding, and we did have some city participation in this program as well, ran out, we were able to stand up CARES Act funding, and our community corrections program is doing a motel
voucher program that's continued through the summer months into the fall, and our plan is to continue it into the winter as well. And it's important, I think, for me to note that it is not limited to community corrections clients, but basically anyone who is unsheltered. On a bigger picture, Commissioner Cribbins mentioned Project Turnkey, and she is one of several commissioners that has been working to advance this idea. Because of my position, one of the many hats I wear is chair of the Oregon Housing Stability Council. I'm a past president of the Association of Counties, and I've teamed with the current president, Jim Doherty of Morrow County, and we participated in a whole series of round-robin meetings with legislative leadership, which I think did in part lead to the vote by the E-Board, Emergency Board on Friday, to fund Project Turnkey, which, as Commissioner Cribbins said, is going to allow the purchase of underutilized motels to convert them into emergency housing. And, this has all been stood up very quickly, but the hope is that with that funding, we're going to be able to acquire 500 hotel rooms and motel rooms statewide to provide emergency service, emergency housing. Now, that is a nice bite of the need, but unfortunately, it doesn't get us anywhere close to what the total need is. Last year, as a member of the Housing Stability Council, I advocated with other members of the council, and we did the first comprehensive statewide study to get a good fix on the number of emergency shelter beds we need in this state, and the number is 10,000, which is a staggering number, but I think anybody, you don't just have to go to Portland or Eugene. You look right along Highway 101, Newport, Lincoln City, Coos Bay, the number of people you see who are living homeless. It is a tragedy. It is a crisis. It has been decades in the making. It has many causes, but really combating homelessness, putting new resources into it, as well as long-term affordable, safe, decent housing has probably been the number one focus issue of my career as a commissioner, and it will continue to be if I'm elected.
Mm-hmm. What's being done to support compliance with the ADA? Is there a budget? Can you talk about what you're doing to develop and implement your self-evaluation and transition plan as part of the ADA requirements?
Well, the county really doesn't have a role, I think, other than in building code work and inspection, excuse me, in enforcing ADA outside the county. But I think we have been pretty committed and pretty focused within county facilities in making sure that we are compliant. For instance, during my time in office, we're dealing with a 60-year-old courthouse. The one elevator in the building was not ADA compliant. We installed a second elevator that is ADA compliant. We installed easy opening doors. And just broadly, the topic has come up about workplace accommodation. And in the other commissioners and I, and working with our personnel department and managers, have really made this a focus and said that, yes, the workplace is changing, the workforce is changing, telecommuting because of COVID has accelerated that, but that we need to think very broadly in terms of accommodating not only folks with physical disabilities, but working parents who need more flexible work hours to handle childcare arrangements, just accessibility of all types, I think really has been a focus for me, a focus for our organization, and something that I'm really committed to continuing.
Claire, I just want to announce for the folks who are on, not just announce, but apologize. I jumped over Amanda Benjamin, who's running for judge on the schedule. So, I think we'll finish, but just so that people know, It's not because she wasn't here. It was my error for going out of order. So, but to continue, what is happening with the convention center is a question somebody had from Lincoln County.
Well, there is no convention center. We do have a plan on the drawing board for a new exhibition hall at our fairgrounds, and that was developed through multiple rounds of public input, and it's been supported with two public votes to direct transient room tax money to that project. The opponents of it have characterized it as a convention center, which I frankly believe is a gross mischaracterization of what it is. It's basically taking a 70-year-old structure that is far beyond its useful life and replacing it with a utilitarian building, much like you'll find at any county fairgrounds, a concrete building, metal walls and roof, large open space that can be used for fairs, boat shows, trade shows, our winter farmers market, and yes, perhaps it may attract a convention, a convention or two, but that is not its primary purpose. We were gearing up last year to, after finalizing the plan, one of the priorities for this year was to really look at moving it to from a finished concept plan to actually going out for architectural services and contract bids. But frankly, that is one of many things that kind of got pushed to the back burner by the twin crises we've been through, first with the COVID pandemic, and then for the last several weeks, the Echo Mountain fire.
So I'm not sure the reason there was an evacuation, but I'm sure you know, one of the questions that came in was that during the evacuation of Lincoln City, we had no way to know we needed to evacuate. Do you see the counties having a new alert system to warn residents? And how does the evacuation plan address the needs of those who are deaf or hard of hearing? How are they alerted? People with disabilities.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on you, but I'm seeing, let's see, 3 questions related to the evacuation and communication. And we did the Echo Mountain Complex fire, which basically hit the Panther Creek area near Otis Rose Lodge, the very northern part of the county. That wiped out about 300 homes. And because of the unpredictable and rapidly changing nature of wildfire, the evacuation area expanded pretty quickly. At one point, the entire northern half of Lincoln City was under an evacuation order. We do have an emergency alert system in place called Lincoln Alerts, and people are able to sign up for landline phone calls, cell phone calls, text messages, emails. We had, I think, the population of our county is roughly 50,000 people. We had about 11,000 people enrolled in Lincoln Alerts at the time that the fire struck our county. We've had several thousand more sign up since then. Although that didn't work perfectly, I think I've heard from a lot of people it did provide them with timely notice through a variety of formats. It has been, but frankly, it did come down to, in a lot of cases, things were moving so fast, so quickly, that it was our sheriff's deputies who were driving through neighborhoods with bullhorns, and in some cases directly knocking on doors, letting people know that they needed to evacuate. And I am very thankful, as horrific as this was, that no one was hurt. But no life was lost, but tremendous destruction. It is there's questions about the local radio stations failing, and my understanding was that all but one of the radio stations was off the air in those critical early morning hours. And here we're kind of combating or having to confront the fact that even though we have multiple communication systems in place, what do we do if multiple systems fail? For instance, I had a conversation with the owner of one of the existing local AM stations. He said they had generator power at their studio site, generator power at their transmitter site, but unfortunately, the way they push their signal from studio to transmitter is by internet, and their internet signal between the two was not functional. So, you know, after every disaster, there's always an after action review, and I suspect ours for this one will be lengthy and in multiple parts, but certainly finding ways to close those communication gaps is going to be a huge priority. I don't know what the answers are. I know some people in Lincoln City have talked about the idea of the city actually sponsoring an AM radio station. You know, I don't know if folks will want to pursue that, or if they would want to explore ways of beefing up the infrastructure for the existing stations to do their role in providing communication. But yeah, I will agree. This was a failure, and we do need to figure out ways to address it. Not if, but when the next large-scale natural disaster strikes.
Continuing follow-up about whether the disability community's needs are addressed or were addressed, folks who are deaf, hard of hearing, how are those people addressed in an evacuation plan? Or are they part of it?
Well, again, hopefully if they're signed up for Lincoln Alerts, they will get the text messages, but and we do messaging in both English and Spanish, by the way, but this is something I think, again, we do need to ask that question if there are more specific things we can do to reach folks who have impairments of various kinds in receiving vital messages like this.
Switch gears a little bit. Do you believe Lincoln County nursing home residents are adequately protected from contracting COVID-19, and what changes would you want?
Well, you know, we have been in regular communication with our public health staff as a board of commissioners throughout the pandemic, and this is something we've discussed with them again and again, that they work in partnership with the Oregon Health Authority to make sure that all of the OHA protocols in terms of isolating staff and patients are followed. You know, tragically, of our 13 COVID-related deaths, I believe 9 or 10 of them did occur in nursing homes. So, you know, that's another question I'm going to ask. And I know this is not, you know, this is not a unique problem to Lincoln County. If you look at the COVID numbers nationwide, you know, that this is a disease that has not wreaked its havoc proportionately. People of color have been significantly impacted, and I believe that something like 1/4 of the total deaths have been folks in the senior population, and a significant number of them have been nursing home residents. So this needs attention at the local level, state level, and national level as well.
Continuing follow-up on integrating people with disabilities and disaster response planning is in the chat box. And the question is, are there people with disabilities included in that planning? Is there a commitment on your part to do more?
I would say the short answer to both questions is yes.
Okay. In your role as county commissioner, have you worked with groups of people with disabilities, and if so, on what issues?
Yes, I have. As a commissioner, I am on the board of directors of the Cascades West Council of Governments, which serves Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties. And in addition to transportation and economic development issues, the major mission and the major resources of our COG are serving as the area agency on aging, the disability and senior services agency for our agency. So I've really had kind of a hands-on experience with that agency, not only serving on its board of directors, but getting to know staff, visiting senior meal sites, really trying to drill down about disability issues. I have, I think Representative Gomberg will tell you that I'm a pretty regular presence in his office, if not a pest, both in person and by phone. And certainly senior and disability issues are one of the things that have always been at the forefront of my concerns. You know, nationally, I think unfortunately, just one of the what I consider our failings as a society is that funding for the Americans with Disabilities Act simply has not kept pace with simple inflation, and also reflecting the fact that we are an aging society and people are living longer and they're living more active lives, which is wonderful. But also the fact is, you know, the older someone gets, the more likely it is they're going to have some level of physical or cognitive impairment or both. And, you know, I've been involved in discussions, planning, but this is something, you know, I fear that much like the coronavirus epidemic and pandemic, until we're really confronted with the fact that I don't think we have the infrastructure in place to realize what challenges we're going to be facing, you know, as the baby boomers start aging into the senior group. You know, I just turned 61 years old. I'm at the tail end of the baby boom, and I know a lot of boomers have already passed through the gate of retirement, and we're the biggest generation in history. And you know, I don't want to see us be, you know, a burden to our children and grandchildren, but I also want to see us, you know, receive the supports, the recognition that we need, the care that we need, the benefits that we have earned through our lifetime of work. So, you know, I've tried to be a consistent voice on this, and my pledge is I will continue to do this for as long as I'm in office.
Thank you. What question would you want to ask your opponent that's running for county commissioner?
Oh gosh, if he was participating today, I guess I would ask, you know, he frequently says, you know, is promoting change, seems to be promoting change for the sake of change. He says that county commissioner should not be a position that people retire out of. I know that it's very fashionable these days to bash career politicians, but, you know, I'm not a career politician. I worked for 25 years as a newspaper and radio journalist before being elected, taking office as a commissioner 15 years ago. And my response is, if the people, you know, this is my every 4 years job review. And if people decide that I am still an effective representative for their interests, why shouldn't I stay around as long as they want me? If they ever decide by their votes that it's time for me to retire from the field, then of course I will do that gracefully. But as of right now, I still feel like I've got a lot to offer. I was an effective commissioner when I took office in 2005. I think I'm a much more effective commissioner now, and it's because of the experience and the network of relationships I've built. It's allowed me to rise to positions like chair of the Oregon Housing Stability Council, and I think that's, you know, that's valuable experience, and it shouldn't just be pushed aside arbitrarily.
All right, I think on that note, I'm going to thank you very much for your participation this afternoon, and appreciate so much your time, giving us your time this Sunday. Is it all right if I call you by your first name?
That's just fine.
Okay, all right. I guess our first question for everyone today has been to please describe your present position, the responsibilities of the position you're running for, and what made you decide to run.
Sure. So I am currently a pro tem judge for Lincoln County. It's a full-time job for Lincoln County, but it is a salaried position that is an employee of the Oregon Judicial Department rather than an elected judge. Pro tem judges have all of the same duties and responsibilities of elected circuit court judges. It's just a different job title and a different length of term. So my position is renewed annually based on available budget from the state, rather than being a permanent position that renews every 6 years. And as a pro tem judge, I do all sorts of cases, just about everything that comes in front of the circuit court in Lincoln County, from criminal cases, family law. I handle all of the juvenile docket for Lincoln County, so juvenile dependency and delinquency cases. I handle mental health and wellness court. And I decided to run for this job because I had actually been in the position when Judge Sanders, who retired from this position, when she went on medical leave, I started fulfilling her duties, taking over her role as juvenile judge. And so when the position opened up, I had already been doing that job for nearly a year. So it made sense to apply for the position. It was the easiest way to transition the staff and the courts, and it would provide consistency to our courts.
Okay, thank you. From one of the Lincoln County voters, if judges can't take positions, how are we supposed to choose?
That's a great question. So judges can't voice opinions on political matters that could come in front of the court. And it's really important. It's a really important rule for judges, because if they were to express their personal beliefs, then there is ultimately going to be parties that come in front of the court that don't feel like they're going to get a fair shake. So judges really have to maintain that impartiality all of the time so that they can fairly hear cases that come in front of them. So I think what the public has to understand, that it's a little bit of a different situation than electing a partisan politician, and they have to look at what qualities are important to have in a judge. Look at the judge's temperament, the judge's reputation in the community, their work experience, kind of like you would for if you were hiring somebody for a position. You don't necessarily ask their personal opinions and beliefs, but you look at what kind of employee they will be.
So would you share with us a little bit about what you think your qualities, temperament, and work experience is?
Sure. So I started practicing law in domestic relations field, and then I became a deputy district attorney in Lincoln County. And I prosecuted, when I started, I prosecuted all types of cases, domestic violence, property crime, DUIs, everything you can imagine. And then I transitioned after about a year into prosecuting almost solely child abuse and sexual violence cases. I prosecuted those for my remainder of time at the district attorney's office until I applied for the pro tem position. A judge has to have a really particular temperament to be effective. The judge sets the tone for the courtroom, how a judge treats people, responds to things. The judge's voice can have so much impact on how the courtroom, how everyone else in the courtroom reacts and behaves. And ultimately, if people feel like they can trust the judge, like the judge hears them and respects them, and understands where they're coming from, they have more respect for the court system. There's been studies that have shown that one of the biggest influencing factors of whether or not a criminal defendant will follow a judge's orders is how that judge treats the criminal defendant. So you need to have judges who listen to people, who are willing to slow down and explain exactly why they're doing what they're doing. So even if it's sending somebody to prison, you're explaining to that person, this is why I'm making the choice. This is why this is happening to you now, so that they understand how they got to where they are. I also think you need judges who want change, so that not just going to come to work every day and do things as they've been done for years, but judges who are constantly looking to improve the court system. I think you'll find very few people who will say that our criminal justice system or our justice system in general is perfect. There's definitely improvements that should be made, and judges need to be on the front line trying to make those improvements and trying to impact the process.
Okay. Do you support diversion of mentally ill offenders?
Diversion?
Mm-hmm.
I do in some cases. One of the things I noticed right after starting to handle criminal cases after becoming a pro tem was that we really needed a program for people that struggle with mental illness. We have a lot of people who aren't connected to resources in the county, who don't have shelter, who would come into the court system, kind of a revolving door situation. And what they really needed was help putting the pieces together so that they could stop the cycle that they were going through. So I made efforts to start a mental health and wellness court. We call it Wellness Court. And it aims to help those individuals get the resources that they need and to have a team around them so that they can hopefully become stable in our community. And some of those cases do involve diversion, not all of them, but some of them certainly do. And if the person gets through a wellness court successfully, they'll eventually graduate and those charges could be dismissed.
Do you think that persons with intellectual disabilities can be credible witnesses? Have you had experiences with people with IDD?
Absolutely. Absolutely they can. One of the things I saw, unfortunately, prosecuting child abuse cases is that the sad reality is children with disabilities can often be targets for abuse. And not just because they're more vulnerable, which sometimes they are, but also because their offenders don't believe they will be a credible witness. And I think I was known for pushing against that belief system and for trying cases where, yes, this child has different abilities, but they deserve to be heard and their abuse matters. And we were successful in presenting those children to juries. And I absolutely think people can be credible witnesses with different abilities.
A follow-up question to that in the chat box. What training exists for judges regarding adjudication for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including ADA accommodations and making sure they understand and fully participate in their cases, especially as crime victims, including support to provide victim and impact statements, for example?
That's a great question. I am not aware of any specific training for judges on that topic. I 100% agree that it's important. I know that there's a lot of training on how to deal with people whose functioning has been affected by long-term drug use. There's a lot of training on dealing with individuals suffering from mental illness. You have to be willing to dedicate your time to it. But as far as intellectual disabilities, I'm not aware of any training for that, but I think I would certainly support that as being a goal for the Oregon Judicial Department, is putting out trainings.
Question for you. What do you bring to our judicial system as opposed to your opponent?
I think that I am not the type of person to ever be satisfied with the way things are. So as soon as I accomplish one goal and I improve an area, I want to move on to the next thing. And this is how I've always been. It's how I am in my personal life. It's how I work. And this is the kind of judge I will be. So I want to improve our community, and I want to do things in a way that makes a difference. I'm not somebody who is going to get this position and then you'll hear from me again in 6 years when I'm running again. That's not my intention. And I think a lot of people, they don't know their judges. They don't know what judges do. They don't know how judges can be impactful in the community. And that's not the way it should be. Judges are community leaders, and we serve the public. And I think that is the biggest thing that I have to offer. I'm also an extremely conscientious person. I think very carefully about everything that I do and every decision that I make. That's just in my nature. So when I'm making decisions on cases, I take a lot of time to make sure I'm making the right decision. I care a great deal that what I'm doing from the bench is the best decision and will make the most improvement in people's lives.
So this is along the lines of community leader, judge as community leader. What is your vision for the future of our judicial system, and what changes would you advocate for and why?
There are big changes and small changes that are on my list of hopes. For starters, I'd really like to work on our relationship between attorneys and community partners in the community. Everybody seems to get along well, but we have a very inactive bar in Lincoln County, whereas you go to other counties and there's social events and there's meetings and there's training events to teach people about different things, and we haven't had that in Lincoln County as long as I've been here. So I would love to start to bring us all together as a group. I think with everybody on the same page and everybody getting along, we're going to be able to serve the community best. So that's one of my kind of short-term projects that I'd like to start on. There are a lot of really great programs that our court could implement if we have the funding and the time. There's some counties are doing family courts, which is similar to drug court, but for families that are involved in the court system or have DHS cases open. I think that would be a great thing for our county. And then there's a lot of little procedural changes that I think overall would help us as a community.
What are your views on whether the court as a whole deals effectively with racial and gender bias?
I think that you can't ignore the overwhelming evidence that there is bias in our justice system. It's there, but I don't think it's there for the most part because, we have police officers or prosecutors or judges who are trying to reach that outcome, but you have people that are coming from different backgrounds, they have different financial abilities, and the system is set up to treat everybody that comes in front of the court system exactly the same. And when you treat someone who's comes from, works full time, is fully capable of leading a productive life and is financially capable, and you treat that person the same as somebody who is unhoused and struggles with addiction or has mental health issues, that's not equality. And so I think we need to start to refocus on looking at every case individually and sentencing a person based on their own circumstances rather than the same sentence for every single person.
Have you happened to have read the new Jim Crow laws? Heard of or read that?
I have not.
Okay, it's a suggestion from the chat. You might look it up.
Okay.
And a follow-up on the ADA question. Do you think judges should get specialized training in the ADA and examples of how it might be able to make a difference?
I certainly don't think it would hurt. The person who would handle those types of, addressing those types of issues in the court system would be our trial court administrator. So if there were needs accessibility of the courts, those types of issues wouldn't be handled necessarily by the judge. But I don't think training ever hurts, because if we're trained in how to make the courts more accessible, then when we see things that could be better, we can promote those changes.
Can you identify, through your experiences today, what you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice for people who are coming to civil or criminal court?
I think, well, recently, the pandemic, but also before COVID-19, probably timeliness. So even if we're processing the cases as quickly as we can, we only have so many defense attorneys in Lincoln County. We only have so many district attorneys. We only have so many jail beds. We can't process cases as quickly as we should be able to in a perfect world. And sometimes that results in not getting justice. If a victim moves, or you lose a witness and you can't go to a trial, there's all sorts of reasons why the longer delay there is between filing a case and a trial or a resolution, where you may not receive the same type of justice. And that's something we just have to continually work on to overcome any lag in resolving the cases.
Mm-hmm. So this really is like a job interview question. Somebody submitted, please describe one instance in which you faced an ethical dilemma and how you resolved it.
An ethical dilemma. So as a pro tem judge, the only ethical dilemmas I can think of are when I know perhaps that a defendant isn't getting the representation that they deserve. I can tell that their attorney isn't appropriately prepared, or it doesn't have the knowledge they need to represent them appropriately, which is a tricky situation, because I certainly can't ask what is happening between the attorney and the defendant, but I may have suspicions that they need more. And I've handled that by sometimes simply reassigning a new attorney to the case if I feel like that's necessary, or giving more time and trying to encourage the attorney to get some help from another attorney, or encourage the defendant to talk more before making a particular decision, just to make sure that they're well informed. Ethical decisions as an attorney, the things that come to mind are if you know that a witness isn't being honest. There were definitely cases like that I received, especially in the child abuse caseload, where you know something isn't being reported honestly, and as a prosecutor, you just have to make the decision that if you know that something isn't being truthful, you can't prosecute the case. In most cases, you have to make that hard decision to tell victims and witnesses that you can't move forward.
So along the ethical lines, I understand that campaign financing has been an issue in this race. Can you talk some about that?
So that was there was an article last week about this issue. There are a lot of laws about campaign finance reporting, and candidates have to report their expenditures in so much time. Now that we're very close to the election day, it's a 7-day timeline. My campaign noticed that my opponent's campaign simply wasn't filing any expenditures, and hadn't for quite some time. And this was a time when we were hearing lots of radio ads. We received 5 or 6 mailers in our mailbox. You know, we knew there was lots of spending happening, but absolutely no reporting. And then there was a negative radio ad that made a statement about judicial appointments are earned, not bought and paid for. And I don't know what the intent behind that radio ad, but I think it's a reasonable interpretation that the campaign was trying to say, I'm trying to buy a judicial position, and at the same time, they're not reporting that they're spending a similar amount as my campaign. So we made the decision to report those violations to the state, and that was done days after those reports were made. Many of those violations were admitted. They're reported late now. Some of them are still outstanding. But I made the decision that, I don't want to lead a negative campaign, but we're judges and we have the responsibility to follow the law and to not mislead the public.
Thank you. Who are your judicial role models and why?
Well, this is kind of an easy one. I've always admired Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's always been somebody that I looked up to, but maybe for different reasons than other people do. Obviously, her work was important for the country, but the reason I really respected her is her personal dealings with people, her personality, how she handled conflict. A lot of people are surprised when they heard that I was a prosecutor, and they're surprised when they hear that I'm a judge, because I'm a quiet, reserved person. I'm rarely the center of attention, and I don't deal with conflict in a confrontational way. And she was the same way. And so I looked up to her as a role model for somebody who could be extremely influential in a different way, in a quiet, influential way.
So how would you describe your general judicial philosophy?
I believe that that's a difficult question, because there's so many different aspects of being a judge. But I think, my ultimate responsibility is to uphold the law and to protect my community. So to protect the rights of my community, to protect the community from harm's way, and to maintain the integrity of our judicial system so that people can trust in it, and people feel comfortable coming in front of it.
What type of clients have you represented while you were an attorney? I know that you were a district attorney. Did you also do or practice civil law?
I did primarily domestic relations, so divorce, child custody cases were what I primarily focused on before working for the district attorney's office.
Can you think of an important case that you had as a lawyer and describe it for us? What made it important to you?
I don't want to be too specific because I don't want to be, the cases are usually involving children, and those people would probably prefer their cases not be public. But what I kind of alluded to this before, what I felt was really important about my role as a prosecutor of child abuse cases was that I was very determined not to let the difficulty of a case determine whether or not I went forward with it. So if a child had limitations or was some type of disability, or some reason that people didn't believe the child, I didn't let that determine whether or not I was going to go forward with the case. It's not about winning or losing. It's about doing what is right. And there were cases that prosecutors before me had declined because they were too difficult, and that child kept being abused, and I was able to stop that. And I take a lot of pride in that, and I think all prosecutors should have that determination to do what is right, not just be focused on a win-loss record.
If your opponent were here, what would be the question you would most like to ask them?
She has primarily focused on her work for the community and her years of experience. And she undoubtedly has more years as an attorney than I do. But what I would ask her is, now that we've both been serving as judges now, what I would ask her is, since you've been a sitting judge in Lincoln County, what have you done for the county? What improvements have you made? What changes have you made? What can we look to in your record to know that you would in fact be a better circuit court judge than myself?
I think that's everything that we have on our plate. Anything you'd like to share with us that we didn't ask you about?
I'll repeat kind of what everybody else said, which is you're welcome to reach out to me personally. My webpage is benjaminforjudge.com, and my contact information is on the webpage. And then, if you don't want to reach out to me personally and you're on the fence about who to vote for, I encourage people to ask those who work in the court system, court staff, attorneys, social workers, foster parents, people that frequently see both of us on the bench, and ask what their honest opinion is of the candidates. And I thank you so much. This is the first time we've been able to have a live forum of any kind during the election, so thank you so much for hosting it.
Appreciate your participation. Thanks a lot.
Okay,
Goodbye.
thank you.